You sound as if you actually believe it's possible to know the future, Dr. Llewellyn.
Ceridwen straightened in her seat.
I do. There happen to be some very scientific theories on how divination works.
Spock nodded.
Jung's theory of the collective unconscious, for one, as well as the more logical explanation of Surex that...
Ceridwen did not let him finish.
I disagree with you, Vulcans. You say it's telepathy and nothing more. What if I could prove otherwise?
Spock raised a disbelieving brow.
I would be most interested in seeing this proof.
Dwen reached into the carpet bag by her feet and produced a small black bundle. She untied the scarf and spread the contents on the table.
Habrini divination stones and old Earth tarot cards. I lectured this evening about the similarities between the two systems. Let me read your future, Mr. Spock. I know tarot best, so I'll use that.
Kirk smiled skeptically.
Well, that's just an old parlor game, Doctor. As a scientist, you can't be serious.
Ceridwen smiled mysteriously at him, obviously relishing the discussion. McCoy didn't believe any of it for a minute, but he was grateful to Ceridwen for providing a distraction for Kirk and Spock. A slight crease had appeared between Spock's dark eyebrows.
Dr. Llewellyn, I frankly do not understand. You say you can prove telepathy has nothing to do with divination? Exactly how do you propose to do so?
Very easily. Touch my mind, Mr. Spock. The Vulcan tensed visibly.
For such an unimportant issue, I would prefer not.
Dwen interrupted as she leaned toward him and closed her eyes.
I'm Esper blind.
Give it a try.
I dare you.
Spock tentatively reached one hand toward Dwen's long face. His fingertips barely grazed her temple. Then he withdrew his hand, his expression one of amazement.
Fascinating.
Dwen opened her eyes and smiled at him.
See? Nothing. Oh, you could achieve a mind meld and get inside my head if you were patient. But I couldn't be accused of annoying natural telepath by broadcasting my thoughts.
Spock nodded. Kirk frowned.
I'm afraid I don't understand.
Spock explained.
Her brain has no telepathic center, no specialized brain tissue to assist the development of telepathic function. A congenital defect analogous to those extremely rare instances when humans born without a speech center are unable to acquire language.
Dwen chuckled as if her handicap were amusing.
If you think of me as a radio, I can't send or receive signals. I haven't any transmitter or receiver. So here am I, interested in magic. Technically, I should make a pretty rotten tarot reader, if it's true that telepathy is all there is to it.
She picked up the pack of dog-eared cards and started shuffling them.
So, can I read for you, Mr. Spock? Past, present, and future? You can judge my accuracy on present and past, but you'll have to wait and see if my predictions come true. Very well, Dr. Llewellyn, I am ready.
Ceridwen put the cards down in a neat stack and shoved them across the table at Spock.
Would you cut these, please, Mr. Spock? Then cut the deck with your left hand.
Spock complied. Surprisingly, he shuffled the cards with the practiced ease of an Arcturian casino dealer. He cut the deck, then set one pile of cards atop the other and gave them back to Ceridwen, who dealt the cards from the top of the deck. She set them face down on the black silk scarf in 3 rows. 2 cards in the first 2 rows, 3 in the last. After the 7th card, she set the pack down and looked up at Spock.
This top row represents the past. The middle is the present, and the bottom is the future. Generally, a reading only goes 6 months back in time and 6 months forward.
She turned over the first 2 cards. Their faces were so worn and faded that McCoy had to squint at them to make them out. The images were of people wearing ancient Greek or Roman clothing. Ceridwen pointed at the first card. Remembering that this is all within the past 6 months or so, the Six of Wands is one of the most favorable cards in the deck. This is the card of victory. Literally, the card represents the triumphant conclusion of a journey, at the end of which you experienced public acclaim. Kirk snickered. As Ceridwen glanced up at him sharply, he replied,
Sorry, Dr. Llewellyn, but almost the entire galaxy is familiar with the fact that the Enterprise's mission was recently completed. Surely you know Spock served as first officer aboard her.
But she was unshaken. I admit that freely, but I didn't pick the card. Mr. Spock did. Ceridwen looked down at the next card. Strangely, the next card doesn't reflect the first one at all. Far from it. The Five of Cups indicates you actually felt regret and betrayal after this successful journey. She glanced up at Spock. The Vulcan's expression revealed nothing, but Kirk shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Ceridwen turned the next 2 cards face up. Now, into the present. The Six of Cups means that you still feel nostalgic right now, wishing things would go back to the way they were. She dimpled suddenly. This second one is rather interesting. The Queen of Cups. Interesting. You will meet a mysterious woman with a great depth of feeling. Spock lifted a brow. Would this be a tall, dark stranger? Maybe. It could be a Terran woman who will come along and read your tarot. Let's try the future, shall we? Ceridwen flipped the last cards over. As she did, McCoy felt her tense next to him. An awed light came into her eyes. Fear, McCoy thought, though by the time she looked up at Spock again, it had vanished. If this were Dwen's idea of a joke, McCoy didn't find it very funny. Finally, Dwen spoke, her expression controlled, somber. Bear in mind, the cards need not be interpreted literally. They only reflect trends, which can always be changed by appropriate action. The future we see reflected here may not come to pass. Spock frowned. Then how shall I judge the accuracy of your prediction, Dr. Llewellyn? But Ceridwen didn't answer. She seemed mesmerized by the cards. McCoy looked at the picture on the next card. A black-robed and hooded figure carrying a scythe. He drew in his breath. If Ceridwen were going to play a joke on Spock, this would not be consistent with her sense of humor. When she finally spoke, her tone was detached. All right. Death. The card is usually not interpreted literally. It signifies a drastic change, some type of loss. Spock interrupted. I am somewhat familiar with the tarot archetypes. It could also mean physical death, could it not? Dwen answered reluctantly. Yes, or the death of someone close to you. This next one is the magician, ill-dignified. That is, upside down. It means... Forgive me, Mr. Spock. I'm not quite sure what it means here. It has something to do with the death card, a power. She didn't finish the thought, but stared down at the cards as if too stricken to make sense of them. After a moment, she spoke again. The last card is the Four of Swords. It indicates a need for reflection and solitude. The need to find a place where the mind can seek peace after the great loss. That's it. That's all there is. Ceridwen picked up her glass and took a very long drink. Kirk's skepticism had faded. He was frowning at Spock with concern, but the Vulcan seemed unruffled by everyone else's distress.
Most interesting, Dr. Llewellyn. I shall wait to see whether your predictions come true.
McCoy shifted in his chair. If things had been tense before, they were even worse now. Dwen sat back, looking distracted and nursing her drink. Kirk stared at the cards and said nothing. Uncomfortable with the silence, McCoy tried to make light of the reading.
Well, that last prediction must have been for me, Spock. That's exactly what I need, solitude and reflection. Do you know of a nice, quiet place where I could get away? Now, this was the end of my lecture tour tonight, and I have some free time. Now, if there's a quiet, restful place in the galaxy, I figure it would have to be here on Vulcan.
Spock pondered something before finally answering.
There is such a place, Doctor. It is not one that many outworlders visit. The mountain retreat of Gaul.
McCoy tilted his head, confused.
Well, I thought only monks or whatever you call them were allowed there.
Not exclusively, Doctor. There is an area reserved for visitors. The Kolinaru, the monks, as you call them, attend to the needs of the visitors. You would be free to relax, to meditate, to be alone. I would be honored if you would accompany me as my guest. Naturally, you would have your own quarters and complete privacy. Dwen interrupted suddenly, her expression once more animated.
Mr. Spock, would it be too rude of me to ask to go along? I would dearly love to interview some of the Kolinaru. I was quite serious when I said that this could be my next research project.
Spock hesitated.
You are welcome to come, Dr. Llewellyn, but I cannot promise that the Kolinaru would agree to discuss their beliefs with you. In fact, I strongly doubt they will.
But Dwen was insistent.
It's more than worth the risk.
To McCoy's surprise, Spock did not extend the invitation to Kirk. After a pointed silence, the Admiral rose.
I enjoyed meeting you, Dr. Llewellyn. It's been very interesting. But I'm afraid I've got to be leaving. I've got a shuttle to catch.
Oh, where are you headed, Jim?
To the planet Jana. They needed some help negotiating a treaty. Take care, Bones. Spock.
He gave each of them a quick nod before he turned and strode from the bar. Later, after Spock was gone, McCoy sat in the bar with Dwen, who was unusually quiet.
Cara Dwen, I've got this funny feeling that you really did believe what you were telling Spock. If I didn't know you better, I'd say those silly cards upset you.
He expected a sharp, humorous retort, but Dwen turned to him with a somber expression.
Would you like to know something, Leonard?
Right now, I wish I didn't believe in those silly cards. Something about the way she said it made a chill travel down McCoy's spine. Two days later, Cara Dwen, Spock, and McCoy arrived at Gaul just after sunrise, before the desert had a chance to heat. Cara Dwen insisted on taking them in her scout. The vessel was small enough for intra-planet trips. Besides, the idea that she could leave again at any minute calmed her. Now it was midday, hot, and intensely bright. Inside her small, dark cell, Cara Dwen sat cross-legged on the stone floor and stared into a candle's flame. She had lied to Spock about the card. She'd known it meant death the moment she saw it, and that it was somehow tied to the upside-down image of the magician. It was a disturbing talent she had, one that she had never been able to talk about to anyone. It happened first with her grandparents when she was 12. She'd known 3 weeks before they died, but at first she thought it was some sort of waking nightmare. She told no one, and after the 2 of them were killed, she still kept it to herself. After all, no one would have believed her. They would have called it hindsight, coincidence. When she felt the same terror for her aunt, and then years later for her father, she kept silent. Each time she would tell herself she was wrong, until time proved her right. Michael had been the hardest. She'd had a crush on him less than a week when she felt compelled to read his cards for him. He was very impressed at the accuracy with which she painted his past and present. She turned over the future, hoping to find herself there, and instead saw death. She told him the same thing she told Spock, and tried to believe it herself. But she hadn't just seen it. She'd felt it. The same cold heaviness, just as she had had for her grandparents, her aunt, her father. Stupidly, she had refused to believe it, and let herself fall in love with him. 3 weeks later, the cards proved right. And now, to feel the same ugly chill, to see death grinning up at her from a stranger's cards. On impulse, she'd volunteered to go with Spock and McCoy to Gaul, suddenly afraid to leave them. Perhaps on Gaul she could learn what to do to keep the cards from coming true. Instinct told her that the solution lay with the Kolinaru. The heavy stone door to her cell slid open a crack. McCoy's voice called, "Dwayne?" She turned toward the door. "Come in, Leonard." McCoy stepped inside, gasping with effort. "Those heavy doors are sure going to give me a hernia. Dwayne, do you realize you're sitting in the middle of the floor staring at a candle? These naval watchers must be getting to you." "Did you come here for a particular reason, Leonard, or just to irritate me?" McCoy ran a hand over his perspiring forehead. "I was bored. It's too hot to walk outside, but if you go down to the base of the mountain, there are hot springs. We could go for a swim. Besides, it's cooler down there." Cara Dwayne stared back at the candle. "Maybe later." "What's with you, Dwayne? I thought you were all excited about talking to these Kolinaru guys. In all the months I've known you, I've never seen you like this. Are you really that worried about something happening to Spock?" She shrugged without looking at him. "Spock's a stranger. Why would I be concerned about him?" But McCoy persisted. "Dwayne, Spock and I are very good friends. I don't believe in those infernal cards of yours, but the way you're acting is beginning to make me nervous." Relenting, she faced him. "I'm sorry, Leonard. I don't mean to scare you. If Spock doesn't want the future I read for him, all he has to do is act." McCoy frowned and puzzled. "And do what?" "I don't know. Spock must figure it out for himself." "Dwayne, if it's not Spock that's bothering you, then what is it? Ever since you've read these cards, you've been acting strangely." She turned away again. "It's personal. I need some time alone, that's all." It was a lie. More than anything else, she wanted to unburden herself to McCoy, to have him reassure her that everything was all right. But she knew his reassurances would all be lies. McCoy answered softly. "All right, Dwayne. If that's what you really want." She didn't turn around to watch him go. Dressed in the white robes of a Kolinar student, Spock walked through the stone archway into the desert outside. His return to Gaul had brought a sense of familiarity and peace. He had made the correct decision. He felt, for the first time in his life, a Vulcan among Vulcans. There was even a measure of satisfaction in participating in the time-honored custom of taking leave of a friend. Spock walked to the edge of the community garden where Sekar knelt, harvesting vegetables for the evening meal. His sleeves were rolled above his elbows, and the muscles of his thick forearms rippled as he lifted the vegetables from the sun-parched soil. The scene was an ancient one. For 50,000 seasons, postulants had harvested food in the same manner, in the same hostile stretch of sand.
Sekar, I have come to take my leave.
Sekar stopped and peered up at Spock. Spock's words were the first step in the ritual. They obliged Sekar to answer and step forward from the garden. The briefest surrender of mental shields, a simple mind touch, a shared memory, and any obligation the two had ever had to each other would be negated. But Sekar did not move.
I am required to finish several tasks today, Spock. I do not have time now, but tonight I will take my leave of you.
Spock would not have been more shocked had Sekar laughed aloud. For Sekar to refuse to complete the ritual at the moment of asking was contrary to custom and courtesy. Even if Sekar were busy, it did not excuse him from taking leave of a friend. Yet Sekar's face was placid, as if he were totally unaware that he had just behaved in a most un-Vulcan manner toward an old friend.
Come back 2 hours after sunset, Spock.
Spock gathered his composure and answered,
Very well, Sekar.
He left puzzled. Sekar went back to his gardening and did not look up again.
Dad blast it!
McCoy sat tangled in a bedsheet and rubbed his right elbow, which had just made contact with the hard stone floor. He had just fallen off the narrow ledge that doubled as his table and bed. His tiny cell was warm during the day, and McCoy assumed that since the desert cooled off at night, his room would too. That was before he learned how efficient the black rock was at holding the heat. The cooler it got outside, the hotter it got in McCoy's room.
Some retreat this was turning out to be.
If he could just make it through the night, he'd get Dwayne to take him back to the city in the morning. He laid back down on the warmth-generating stone and closed his eyes. It was simply too damn early to be trying to sleep. He was doing it out of sheer boredom. True, he had wanted to get away, but he wanted to go someplace where he could do something. He sighed. The source of his unrest was Dwen, of course. And this damn thing with Spock. Although Kara Dwen's dire prediction didn't seem to bother the Vulcan at all. But ever since that night, something seemed to be eating at Dwen. As for McCoy, he refused to be afraid of Spock dying on sheer principle. A bead of sweat trickled down his forehead and stung his eye. That did it. McCoy jumped up and pulled on his clothes. Maybe he'd take a nice stroll out in the chilly air. He slipped through the doorway and tiptoed down the hall, mindful of all the Vulcan ears behind the other half-open doors. He paused at Kara Dwen's door, which was open just a crack. Inside, yellow-orange candlelight flickered. Dwen, you still awake? No answer. With a grunt, McCoy pushed against the door's formidable stone mass. Kara Dwen was sitting inside, still staring into the flame of the now melted-down candle. She came to with a jerk and put a hand to her heart. Her eyes were wild. McCoy hung back awkwardly.
I didn't mean to startle you, Dwen. I was going to cool off in the Scout and wondered if you wanted to join me.
She stared at him with her hand still over her heart and whispered,
No, I don't think so, Leonard.
When she said nothing else, just sat staring at him with that oddly disturbing expression, McCoy added,
Well, if it's locked, I'll need the override combination, if it's all right.
It's quite all right, Leonard. It's unlocked. This is... She faltered, her eyes filling with tears. Alarmed, McCoy crouched beside her and put a hand on her shoulder.
Dwen, are you really that upset about Spock?
There's nothing you or I can do, Leonard. It's more than just the cards. They only reaffirmed what I felt. You'll think I'm crazy, but I just know.
She said it with such utter conviction that McCoy caught his breath. You mean, you know when people are going to die?
She nodded and hung her head. McCoy was scarcely able to believe what she was saying. She looked up at him. When I read Spock's cards, it seemed to hover over all of us, even me. And then it moved around the table. It settled over the two of you.
McCoy stared at her, not wanting to understand what she was saying. Spock? And me?
Caradwen was looking at him as if he were already dead. Silently, she nodded.
For one brief instant, McCoy allowed himself to believe and felt a thrill of honest fear. And then, common sense kicked in. He rose angrily to his feet. Enough! This is ridiculous!
Panicked, Caradwen reached after him.
Please, don't go out into the desert tonight, Leonard. Stay here where it's safe. Gol, it's safe. I can feel it.
Dwen, I realize you're upset and worried about me, and I'm flattered. But I'm not going to die any time soon, and that's a promise. And Spock? Well, I've seen him in a lot of tight situations, and he's always been able to take care of himself.
She rose, her face taut with worry. In a gesture of concern that touched McCoy, she reached a hand to his cheek.
I wish I could believe it, Leonard. Please, promise me you won't go out into the desert.
I'm going to the Scout, and that's that. I'm not going to stay in this infernal heat. Maybe what you foresaw was my being roasted to death on a bed of hot stones.
She didn't smile.
Then, please be careful, Leonard.
Why, I always am.
He touched her cheek. Outside in the corridor, McCoy forced himself to forget Dwen's dire prediction. Death indeed. The only dangers here at Gaul were heat and boredom, though both, McCoy reflected with grim humor, were rapidly escalating to lethal levels.
McCoy made it to the vessel without incident and stepped inside. The air in the ship was hot and stale, but he switched on the controls. In no time, the environment of the cabin reached Earth normal conditions. Caradwen had a small servitor on the ship. McCoy chose a gin and tonic, since it was the only liquor available on the program. The tumbler that appeared was ice cold, sweating, and admirably tall. McCoy settled back into a thickly cushioned seat, sipped his drink, and gave a blissful sigh. He'd sleep here, then return to the retreat early the next morning. In his enthusiasm, he drank up the gin and tonic a little too quickly, then programmed up 2 more before he crawled onto the bunk and fell into a deep, contented sleep. Sekar stood in the dark hallway and was afraid. While he believed with his mind that there was no shame in feeling so, his years of exposure to Vulcan training made the acceptance of emotion difficult. Some time ago he realized that even if he succeeded in freeing others from Surak's influence, he himself would never be completely free. Now that the time for action had come, he had to search deep within himself to find that other Sekar. Sekar the free. Sekar the Romulan sympathizer. He had been so long among the Kolinaru that he had come close to forgetting his original purpose.
The feeling of being drugged finally wore off, and McCoy sat propped up on the bunk, contemplating a means of escape. Even if he managed to catch the Vulcan off guard and knock him out, there was the matter of navigating the ship, and McCoy couldn't pilot himself out of a wet paper bag. With a sigh, McCoy gave up the notion of escape and tried to figure out what was wrong with Zackle. The odd symptoms, the facial grimaces, the erratic behavior, the gruesome, decidedly un-Vulcan smile could be caused by a medical problem, such as a brain tumor, triggering psychosis. At least it sounded more plausible than Zackle's claim that he was some sort of a dead Vulcan ruler. Quietly, McCoy rose and tiptoed over to the storage compartment across from the bunk, then raised the lid. Inside, he found a small metascanner. McCoy removed it, closed the lid, then strolled nonchalantly up behind the seated Zackle. The doctor waved the scanner quickly over the Vulcan. It bleeped softly before McCoy could hide it behind his back. Zackle glanced at it and raised a brow, then returned to his controls. He was behaving like a normal Vulcan again. Perhaps the madness had only been temporary. Encouraged, McCoy struck up a casual conversation.
How much longer before we get to where we're going?
Approximately 3.4 hours. We are stopping at Arcturus to obtain a cloaking device. One is necessary in order to safely enter the neutral zone. McCoy hesitated, then directed his warmest smile at the Vulcan.
You know, if you'd just let me off on Arcturus, it would be easier on both of us.
Calmly, the Vulcan shook his head.
Impossible. It would allow you to inform the authorities before I have a chance to escape to the neutral zone. I cannot risk that, Dr. McCoy. Come on, Zackle. You could leave me someplace deserted to give you enough time.
The Vulcan glanced sharply at him.
My name is Sekar. Who told you about Zackle? Has he spoken with you?
McCoy drew in a breath and took a step backwards.
No, not at all. I must have gotten confused on the name. Sekar, you say? Well, I'd certainly appreciate it if you'd consider what I said, Sekar.
The doctor scurried to the safety of the bunk and peeked at the scanner readout, then sighed and dropped the scanner on the bunk. Nothing, not a single reading beyond the norm. The Vulcan was perfectly healthy, except that he was certifiably insane, and there wasn't anything McCoy could do about it except pray for a chance to escape. And consider the possibility that Cara Duen's prediction had been right after all. Spock acquired a sleek Vulcan shuttle equipped with warp drive and transporter. By then, McCoy and his kidnapper had been gone for hours. After the passage of so much time, Cara Duen feared that tracking the stolen scout's course was impossible. Spock and Psi failed to share her despair. They busied themselves with preparing the craft for takeoff. Cara Duen sat in the pilot seat as Spock called out the system's checkoff. All the while, she fought a growing sense of futility that threatened to spill over into tears. When she could stand it no more, she interrupted Spock.
How can we possibly find Leonard? They could have gone in any direction. Tracing a small craft like that will be impossible.
Spock glanced enigmatically at her, then returned his attention to his control panel.
All systems functional, Dr. Llewellyn. Ready for takeoff.
But which heading, Spock? Behind her, a voice intoned,
Mark 414.
Cara Duen turned. Psi sat in the passenger seat, her eyes closed. Her hands were steepled in an attitude of meditation. Spock entered the heading into the navigational computer, then glanced over at Caradwen and said, "High Master Tsai will be directing us." Mystified, Caradwen turned back to her own control panel. The Vulcan's calmness brought a strange comfort. Caradwen waited until the craft sailed out of Vulcan's orbit and the Erebee system, and reached warp drive before she returned her gaze to Tsai. The Master was still in a trance. Caradwen realized she was concentrating on the Vulcan inside the Scout. Curious, Caradwen faced Spock.
"Mr. Spock, I swore I'd never reveal anything, and I don't see how I can help you without knowing what we're up against. What is this Katra that Sekar stole? Is it a weapon?"
Eyes averted, Spock answered reluctantly. "It is a spirit. The spirit of a Vulcan, Zackle. He died some 2,000 years ago." Caradwen drew in a soft breath. The anthropologist in her half smiled in wonder.
"My God, but how?"
Zackle's Katra was preserved, as are all those of Kolinar High Masters. His mental powers were great, but his scruples were non-existent. He was a great enemy of Surax. His own students turned against him and imprisoned him. Caradwen frowned.
"I still don't understand, Spock. Why is Tsai worried about Zackle's knowledge getting to the Romulans? Surely they have their own methods for mind control?"
Spock interrupted with an intensity she had never seen in him. "The humans of today cannot conceive of the type of power wielded by the ancient High Masters. These were the most powerful of all magicians. It is recorded that Zackle killed his enemies simply by willing it. The methods he used were quite gruesome. When the Romulans separated from the Vulcans, none of the old High Masters went with them. Those on Vulcan chose to align themselves with Surak. The discipline underwent a radical change in philosophy. The path of Kolinar still harnesses great mental powers, but applies them inward, to the individual's mind and emotions, rather than using them to control others. For the Romulans to gain control of these powers, for any war-loving race to gain control of them..." Spock broke off and shook his head.
"I can discuss this no more. Tsai is attempting to guard us from Zackle's telepathic powers. I can try to shield my own thoughts, but it increases our chances of being detected."
Dwen turned away to stare blindly at the view screen. My God! With a thrill of fear, she recalled the card that touched death. The magician, ill-dignified. The ship was no longer moving. McCoy woke and pushed himself to a sitting position, then stood up and peered at the pilot's chair. It was empty. Sekar must have landed the Scout on Arcturus. McCoy called out as he rose unsteadily to his feet.
"Sekar? Zackle?"
No reply. McCoy crowed with as much energy as he could muster.
"Hallelujah! I've been abandoned!"
He dashed to the front of the ship and settled into the pilot's chair. It took him a minute to find the subspace radio controls.
"This is a Class 1 distress call."
A shrill burst of static made him grimace and cover his offended ears with his hands. McCoy tried again. This time the noise was even louder. Discouraged, he switched the radio off, then headed for the hatch. Eagerly, confidently, he strode face first into the hatch and landed sprawled on his backside, rubbing his nose. The Vulcan had locked him in the ship with no chance of escape. McCoy returned to the console and slumped in the pilot's chair. So this was what Dwen foresaw. McCoy, cut down in the prime of life by a crazed Vulcan. Spock would have deemed it poetic justice. McCoy leaned forward and rested his forehead against the console. A sound at the hatch distracted him from his misery. The doctor raised his head just as the hatch opened. He expected to see Zackle, and therefore saw nothing. Nothing, that is, until he adjusted his vision downward to where the stocky figure of the Tellarite stood. To McCoy's human eyes, the Tellarite's squat, hair-covered body and decidedly porcine features were repugnant, though its thick fur was a strikingly lovely shade of copper. The diminutive alien raised a phaser and growled at McCoy in a language that was definitely not standard. Under normal conditions, the doctor would have been terrified. Now, he grinned hugely at his attacker.
You want to steal the scout, don't you?
The Tellarite emitted a nasty snarl and gestured with the phaser. Cheerfully, McCoy raised his hands and retreated from the pilot's chair.
You're more than welcome to it, friend.
He took a step backwards toward the hatch as the thief crossed over to the controls. The hatch swooshed open behind the doctor, who was babbling with relief.
Thank you, and bless you.
He stepped outside and sank into damp, marshy ground as the hatch closed. He was free and alone in the Arcturan night. McCoy turned and ran before his accidental benefactor could change his mind. It was night, and the ground was thick, ankle-deep mud that was littered with garbage. McCoy ran as fast as he could in the treacherous slime. In front of him shone the bright glow of a city. He'd find his way to a public comm station, flag down the nearest Federation vessel, and see Dwen and Spock again. As the time-worn saying goes, Arcturus is the place where everyone goes to make deals. Nestled in the center of a major pirate corridor, Arcturus has stubbornly resisted all overtures from the Romulans, the Klingons, and even the Federation. The planet is infamous, one of the few bona fide anarchies in the galaxy. There is no Arcturan government, therefore there is no bureaucracy, no red tape, and certainly no laws. If any part of the planet can be said to be ruled by anyone to any degree, it is related to who owns the deadliest weapon at any given moment. While Arcturus is the one place in the galaxy where Klingons, Romulans, and Terrans are free to enjoy the lucrative aspect of illegal trade between their empires, the reality is scarcely utopian. Swift and bloody fights are commonplace in the bars, and the natives are unprejudiced as to the outcome. They regard their Terran, Klingon, and Romulan visitors with equal contempt. It was into this unhealthy milieu that McCoy stumbled. Before him stood the city, a collection of sleek and shining edifices that contrasted shockingly with the squalor outside. Each building was veiled by its own force field. As McCoy neared, he saw that the nearest building was also guarded by two armed, surly Arcturans. The doctor approached them with an ingratiating smile.
Excuse me, sirs, but my name is Dr. Leonard McCoy, and I need to get to a public comm. I was kidnapped, you see, and
One guard curled his upper lip, revealing black, toothless gums, and snarled at McCoy with the conviction of a trained Doberman. The other raised his phaser and picked out a spot in the middle of McCoy's forehead. McCoy raised his hands and backed away. The guards cackled derisively as the doctor darted back into the dark street. Discouraged, McCoy was preparing to approach a different building when he heard the sound of feminine laughter behind him. He turned and saw a tall, shadowy figure. It stepped forward into the city's glow. Like all Arcturans, she was humanoid, and the ghostly pale skin of her forehead was creased with folds of excess skin, reminding McCoy of a certain Asian breed of dog. Her earlobes were pendulous and crusted with dozens of sparkling earrings, and she was quite bald, save for an ornament of exotic feathers on the crown of her head. At the sight of McCoy, her thick lips stretched into a smile. "You here are new," McCoy answered eagerly.
Yes. Is this Arcturus?
She nodded.
I need very badly to get to a public comm station. I need to get in touch with Federation authorities.
The Arcturan threw back her head and laughed. Her feather spray fluttered in the humid breeze. "On Arcturus you will find public comms not. Private comms, yes. Money. Much more."
Well, the money doesn't matter. If you can just get me to a comm, I'll pay you. Name your price.
She lowered her eyelids and studied him.